everyone, welcome to Reading with Even. Let's get on with the bookish video. If you know me, if you watched this channel before, you know that you can make a montage out of me holding up a book in my wrap-up and talking about it and saying, this could have been 50 pages shorter. This section waffled on a lot. This could have been trimmed down. I'm a girl who, even in litfic, I prefer shorter books, not for the sake of, oh, this is a competition, I need to get to as many books as possible, but a lot of the time, I feel like any book could be edited down, even keeping like the flowery, prosy description language, you still can make amendments to round it up a bit, you know. So that's the case 90% of the time. However, there is that 10% where a book is chunky, but it hits just right. And today I will talk to you about 7 books that I think are the perfect length the way that they are and why that length works for them. All of these books, I believe, I have given 5 stars to. I might have said that some sections can drag a little bit, but ultimately it didn't drag down the ranking and it didn't hinder my enjoyment of the book. But looking down on these books in retrospect, it makes sense for them to be the length that they are. So the criteria was any book that is over 425 pages. I know that seems like a very random number, but there are some thrillers that are literally like 402 pages, so I didn't really want to include them here, because I think that 400 is like on that cusp, but like then anything that's like 430, 40 and all that's heading into the thick territory. So I have ordered them in a stack from the thinnest to the thickest after that 425 page mark. So let's begin. First book that I'm going to talk about is Penance by Eliza Clark, which this edition is 429 pages. This is a fictional true crime story about these 3 girls who burn their peer and their friend alive, brutally murdering her, and no one really knows why. So you have these girls who are in correctional facilities, and then you have this guy interviewing their families, interviewing them, interviewing their friends, just trying to piece together what could have led to this. And I've spoken about this book in probably like 6 different videos, so I don't know what else can I really say in terms of why I think it's a brilliant exploration of a lot of things, but why is the length optimal here? Well, I do think for this sort of story, you need time to really be with your characters, even the horrible ones who commit such heinous crimes. You need time to get perspective on them and to try to understand why this happened, and you need that time to be in the situation. It's just something that requires some development and some marinating over. It does have some historical sections that I know some people really didn't like it, which is completely valid, because if you're not really interested in town's oil history, like from the oil trade or whatever, you're gonna think, what am I reading? But I do think that it provided some necessary context for the surroundings that these girls grew up in and the town that they're a part of in the community. Even if you don't like it, and it's valid to not like it, because if it's not something that you're interested in, you're not gonna care, and if that causes you to not like this book, that's completely fine. But for those who are into that sort of stuff, it makes sense for that to be in the book, and it doesn't really drag the story down, because it's relevant for what the author's trying to convey. So to me, this is definitely the perfect length, and while it's not my personal Eliza favorite, I would definitely recommend it to everyone, as I do think that it is her most ambitious work just so far, because of course I'm sure she'll surprise us, yeah, but it's just based on all the technicalities that come into writing a book in such format, I would definitely say that it's commendable, even if it's not your personal preference. Then I have another book at 429 pages, not including the afterword, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's a well-known classic at this point. This is a gothic horror suspense about a young unnamed woman who is approached by a man who could be her father, as she's kind of like escorting an older woman. It was a common thing back in like the 1930s. So he basically proposes to her because he doesn't want to be alone, as his wife passed away recently, and she thinks this might be a better life for me because I'll be someone's wife, governess of a property, whatever. So she accepts, and then they go back to this man's estate, except that it's not quite as it seems. The wife is haunting, like the first wife is haunting the place in every possible sense. The staff kind of hate this unnamed narrator, and even the husband is just sort of like, I mean, it's such an atmospheric read, especially like in the first 2/3. A lot of it is sort of a slow building of suspense that it's necessary for it to build bit by bit for it to reach that boiling point. And then in the last third, the book kind of becomes something a little different that puts a lot of things into perspective as well. And I think that it was needed for it to be this length to have that payoff be worth it, because it really allowed you to just feel uncomfortable while reading and to develop these characters, and then you think that you know what's happening, but then there's some insidious undertones to what's happening as well. I honestly loved it. I think it was like my 6th favorite book of last year, if I can recall correctly. I do have a video where I rank my top 20 of last year. It's definitely up there. And I was a bit mid on Jamaica Inn. I don't think that one worked for me as well. So if I had to recommend one book of hers, make it this one. Unless I find a new favorite, but I'm not sure. This one really left an impression on me. And at 432 pages, I have The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is her newest book so far. She is releasing her first adult thriller sometime this year, I think sometime in June. So I will definitely be checking that out, as I do think she's one of those authors that she writes more about young people, but her books don't read juvenile. Maybe with a bit of an exception of Five Survive. But this follows Belle, whose mom disappeared when she was 2 years old, and everyone sort of thought that her father was responsible, but he got cleared, although his name was still a bit, well, you can imagine, it's always the husband. He was put through all the mud that you can think of. So she's very much a daddy's girl, has lots of abandonment issues, and kind of lashes out at people a lot. So when a true crime documentary crew decide to make a series about her mother's disappearance, she's like, well, I'm not loving this, but we need to pay my granddad's hospital bills, caretaker bills, whatever. So they start the documentary, participating in it, and then one day her mother reappears and tells the story of where she's been for the past 16 years, and Belle's like, something's not adding up. I need to get to the bottom of it. So she becomes a bit of a sleuth detective, and I do think that this one is the perfect length the way that it is, because for reasons I've discussed in previous videos, this book actually made me feel so uncomfortable and so on the edge of my seat, because a lot of what was happening, it was such a real story, such a real thing that happens to women and families every day, without spoiling it. But I do think that if you watch true crime, or just in general, if you're like aware of domestic things that happen across the world, like, this wouldn't surprise you per se, but it's really, like, in true Holly Jackson vein, she conveys a lot of things that aren't necessarily the most likable or the most, like, favorable, but she delivers them really well, and she explores a lot of relationships and dynamics as she does so. And I would definitely recommend it, because I would say that as a series, in my deep dive for this author, as a series of Good Girls Guide to Murder, I definitely prefer this one, but it's kind of hard to measure standalone against a series. If it's just the first book, then they're definitely like a strong tie, but I would say don't discredit her just because she's YA, and definitely check this one out. Then I have a book that is 465 pages, and that is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I feel like everyone knows what this book is about, but just in case, I'll still say we have a family who moved to this small town, and their house is near a busy road. Our main character, Lewis, he's a doctor, and he meets his neighbor who shows him this ritual that neighborhood kids do. They bury their pets because of the motorway. It's very common, unfortunately, for them to have accidents. And the kids in the neighborhood, they bury their pets in this pet cemetery. But what is revealed shortly after is that there's a section behind the cemetery that is like Indian burial ground sort of situation, and things that are buried there come back. So when the family cat is ran over, Lewis has the genius idea of not breaking his daughter's heart and teaching her about death. And you can see where that's going. And sometimes dead is better is one of the taglines for this book. And I think that's a pretty brilliant description. I would say, although personally I prefer The Shining or Misery, this one, objectively speaking, book-wise at least, is probably King's best work. It is so much more than just some cemetery bringing zombies back or whatever they're meant to be. It's about death and grief and different responses people have to dying, because Lewis's wife, she is completely irrational and refuses to even acknowledge that death exists. There's a lot of trauma there, and then we think Lewis is the one who's handling the situation really well, but then when shit hits the fan, he starts losing it. It's about people doing horrible things to not have to face their grief and to not have to face the finality of death, which is obviously one of the, if not the scariest things that we as humans can think of, in terms of just our brains can't handle the fact that we're not going to be there one day, you know. And I don't even want to go into that now because I'll have an existential crisis on camera, so it's not going to be fun for anyone. But I would say that this is where he really hits the spot, and it's one of his few books that lands the ending quite fantastically. And yeah, I would definitely say that if somehow you've not read much King, or like you don't know what's worth it, because we know his catalog is massive, and frankly a lot of it is probably not worth one's time, definitely make this one a must. And if you are only ever gonna read one Stephen King book ever, make it this one. I have a book that is 466 pages. It's a very tight competition apparently, but that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Again, the thriller to rule all the thrillers, but I will still tell you the main synopsis. So we have this happy suburban family of Nick and Amy Dunn. They have no children. One day Amy goes missing, and again, it is always the husband. 99% of the time it is. So Nick immediately falls under suspicion, and he's acting really strangely, like he doesn't seem to be that concerned that she's missing. He is smiling during like police interviews or vigilance meetings where her parents are pleading for people to send them tips and all that. And yeah, we're meant to think, well, what is happening here? If you've not been spoiled for the twist somehow, please avoid anything about this book until you do, because I do think it's definitely worth not knowing. I think I wasn't spoiled until I saw the movie, and I think that the movie is probably one of the best book-to-movie adaptations ever. So I would definitely recommend it. But why do I think that this deserves to be leaning towards 500 pages? Well, I do think that for this sort of thriller that is like domestic suspense, kind of like missing person, murder mystery-esque sort of thing, I think that to understand these characters and to understand their motivations, you have to spend your time with them. And it's an amazing exploration of how marriage can kind of ruin your life if you fall into these patterns and make these mistakes, and how resentment can build up. Like, there's a lot to unpack there. But I do think for that sort of deconstruction to really show what it can do to people and the extremes that this book goes through to get to those points, I think that you need to spend time with them. You need to spend time building up the tension, because the main twist of this book is in the middle. So you get that tense first half, and then you get to the twist and you're thinking like, what the hell? And then you get that deconstruction as to how everything happened, but you still have some twists waiting for you to see how it all wraps up. I think that it warrants for you to soak in those emotions and those characters. You spend that time with them, and for better or for worse, you get attached to them, even if they are horrible, horrible people. So, yeah, not to mention that it's one of the best thrillers ever written. I think it deserves that title. I would say it's definitely worth all. I have two more books. One of them is also 466 pages, and I just wanted another excuse to talk about it, and that is The Mary Shelley Club by Goldie Moldavsky. This is a YA slasher thriller, sort of, and I know some people get put off by YA, but this one is definitely more about, it's a story about young people. It's not a juvenile, sloppily written story for like preteens, young teens, whatnot, because we have this girl who, she gets attacked, Rachel, I believe is her name, let me check. Yep, so Rachel, she gets attacked in the very first scene. These two masked men break into her home, which is already horrifying, and her and her mother move away, and she enrolls her into this super prestigious school. Think, this is blurbed as being a cross of Gossip Girl and Scream, so like think of basically St. Constance, Ballard, St. Jude's, whatever the schools are called in Gossip Girl. I think that sort of vibe, and she kind of finds herself in this group of horror movie buffs, because it's her way of coping, watching all the scary movies she can find. And this group, they're much more than just movie fans. They are conducting a series of pranks. They don't like calling them that, but they're horrible pranks that they're conducting on people who wronged them. And they're getting very out of hand, basically. So when Rachel starts expecting that there's a real killer who's using these pranks to butcher people, she tries to stop it before it's too late. And this one had me genuinely surprised. I actually cared for the characters. I think that it showcased really well the rich teenager trust fund kid mentality, and how, I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like thinking like that, because, you know, I'm not rich. I wasn't born into it. Or, you know, I would be on a yacht right now. But it really showcases how it must feel like to know that you're always gonna have someone to fall back on who's gonna, like, bail you out financially and, like, cover everything up so that your reputation's not damaged and all that. It really breeds that sort of sense of entitlement and ownership of everyone around you, because you know you can do what you want and you won't have to be held accountable for it. I thought that was really well shown. I genuinely, I was into some romance that was going on there, which I know sounds strange because I'm not a romance girly, but I don't mind romances in books. But yeah, as far as that goes, like, I was really surprised, and the slashy bits, they weren't graphic and there weren't that many, but it was more like the suspense of like what the hell is going on sort of thing. So I really, really enjoyed that. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Also, I can't believe that I got this cover for £2, like hardcover in perfect condition pretty much. Like, honestly, As far as slasher books go, I've not read that many yet. I'm still on the search, but I've only given 3 5 stars. This, Camp Slaughter, and Savage Island. So I would say that if you were actually looking for like a deeper book where you will care about the characters, then this is definitely your best bet out of the 3. So yeah. And last but definitely not least, we're taking a jump because this book is 629 pages, and that is nothing other than The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is kind of like an epistolary novel about this guy. What's his name? I think his name's Richard. It's not in the synopsis, but I'm 99% sure his name's Richard. He goes to this university in New England, and he joins this group where they, like super pretentious intellectuals, rich trust fund kid people who do drugs all the time and like do horrible things and go on their trips and just super horrible people basically, but he's enamored by that lifestyle and he wants to be a part of it. So he gets involved in whatever shenanigans they're doing, but those shenanigans get out of control when they end up seriously harming someone, and they again don't want to take accountability for it. So we kind of see how that unfolds after it's already happened to show how they ended up where they ended up. And for a book that is this thick, it didn't feel dense at all. It genuinely felt like every word, every paragraph, every description had a purpose. It is the most, apart from like some kind of thriller like or like fantasies or whatever that I might have read in my life, I would say that this is probably like one of the most, if not the most autumnal books I ever read. There were other seasons described, but I just kept thinking of autumn when I read this. I could imagine all the leaves and all the colors and everything. It was so vivid, and it didn't feel forced. Like, it flew very naturally, everything was so joined together so nicely, so the fluidity, like, it didn't feel like the author was trying too hard to be pretentious, to unless it was on purpose by the characters. She didn't try too hard to like impress you. She just had the story that she wanted to say, and it was meaningful and it was powerful. And I mean, this book is a classic for a reason. I don't think I met anyone who didn't like it. Even people who don't really like thick books, they want to see what all the fuss is about. And it's such a shame that she only has like 3 books, including this one, but also it's definitely the sort of thing that I can't imagine writing this sort of book quickly. It's definitely not like a mindless entertainment thriller that you can bake in 3 months. Like, you would need to stew on this book. You would need to work on it. Just make sure that everything is perfect, and it is, honestly. Like, you will rarely, if ever, hear me say this, but if a 6+ 100-page book does not have any waffle that you're just thinking, can we just get to the point? It's art. There's no other way to describe it. And these are the 7 books that I think are worth their length. I can't really say that I will make a part of this, like part 2, I mean, anytime soon, because I don't read thick books like that too often. And I don't think that it's very common in the genres I read to have books that thick as well. Even like litfic, a lot of them are quite thin, or like thrillers and stuff. If anything, I always say that thrillers should not be like over 400 pages because it just goes against the genre. If you have this thriller that's meant to be fast-paced and you're reading it thinking this is dragon, that defeats the entire purpose of the genre. So yeah, I think that thick books like that, a lot of the time they are more for like fantasies and all that requires a lot of world building, and I don't really read fantasy that often, let alone chunky books. So yeah, I will probably make a part or 2 at some point in like the next few years, but I want to make sure that the books I will talk about are definitely going to be worth the length for you to put that time and effort into reading them. So if you read any of these, please share your thoughts, and I hope to see you next time.